Welcome to Hour 3 of The Truth with Sherwin Hughes. And as promised, Michael Wynn is in studio. Michael, welcome to the program, and thank you for taking the time and being here. Thank you for showing up.
Happy to be here. Happy to show up.
You have an incredible story and a great journey. You are the executive director of Teach for America. You moved to Milwaukee after joining the first cohort of TFA Milwaukee Core members in 2009. Formerly, you managed admissions, communications, and fund development as chief of staff at Carmen Schools of Science and Tech, a network of 5 public elementary, middle, and high schools. Previously served as the senior managing director for TFA Leadership Development at TFA Milwaukee, principal at St. Anthony Middle School, teacher at St. Anthony School, and MPS, a graduate of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Earned your master's from Marquette University and your Wisconsin State licensure in education, administration, and curriculum and instruction from Alverno College. Well, you certainly have the resume and the experience to occupy the positions that you do. We're going to talk about the diversity in the teachers that we have currently. And if we focused on the Milwaukee Public School system, and we talk about them a lot because this is the predominant way in which the majority of the children in this city get educated. And when there's a referendum, it is MPS that receives our tax dollars because most of us see the investment in public education as worthwhile. Michael, can you tell us about the importance of having a core of teachers and instructors that are as diverse as the students that they teach?
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me on here. And folks who are listening might already know this, but if we look at the state of Wisconsin, it's about less than, I think, 5% of folks who are teachers of color in the state, about 2% who are black and brown men, right? And Milwaukee is much more than that. And I think in Milwaukee, it's 20 to 30% of folks who are people of color, who are teaching and leading classrooms. Teach for America, our cohort ranges around 40 to 45% annually, bringing in teachers of color. And while I didn't, let me start with this, if you don't mind, right? So I'm a Vietnamese American. Parents were immigrants to the U.S. after the Vietnam War. Refugees came here, had to figure out their lives, help other folks acclimate to living in the U.S. after being in Vietnam all their lives, right? So for me to come to Milwaukee, and I taught at Carson Academy in Milwaukee Public Schools my first year, taught at St. Anthony my second year, and those schools were largely monolithic, right? I learned so much my first year at Carson Academy from the black women teachers who taught in the 7th and 8th grade classes around me, of what it looked like to listen to students, to value their backgrounds, where they were coming from. And my first year, I didn't look like my students, right? Nor my second year, right? Because I taught at St. Anthony, which was predominantly Hispanic Latino kiddos, right? But my first year, it was coaching flag football. It was going to Wednesday night church. It was getting dinner with a group of my kids every now and then and really figuring out who they were and their backgrounds to better connect and make sure my instruction really fit really reached my children. But the ability for Teach for America to bring in teachers who look like the students that they are teaching, it is showing children what it looks like to lead in the community, what it looks like to be an outstanding adult, and for the classroom, the engagement, the interactions, the ability to make lessons, not just relative to what the kids' interests are, but like a representation of Milwaukee, really engages children to learning and wanting to just excel in the classroom.
Michael, how do you get, because I know that it's wishful thinking to believe that we can get, in at least a short amount of time, a much more diverse crop of folks who want to teach at schools that we know are incredibly diverse. But how do you encourage, especially a young teacher, you are more than just someone who is leading a classroom, that you really should take advantage of other opportunities to get to know your students, to be involved in the neighborhoods and the communities in which your students live in, especially in these days and times where there's no residency requirement. A lot of these teachers may live somewhere else, outside of the community in which their students live. How do you encourage teachers to be more involved just to better connect with their students and also so they can learn a little bit more cultural competency?
I mean, at the end of the day, teaching is about building relationships with children, gaining their trust, right? Because like you're not going to listen to someone who you don't think believes in you, who you don't think cares about your well-being, right? Teaching isn't just lesson planning and executing in front of the classroom. It's about having a classroom culture where children want to learn, right? So if that is like one of the first questions that we have is like, how do you get kids engaged and care about what they're learning through relationships? Then your job as a teacher is to build those individual relationships. So A, it is like a relational piece, but B, it is very much a tactical piece. Like you learn this in education programs. You learn this through Teach for America about building relationships, building classroom culture. So while it is about building those one-on-one connections, it is also in my belief, a prerequisite for being an excellent classroom teacher.
Speaking with Michael Wynn, the executive director of Teach for America Milwaukee. Michael, there is indeed a workforce gap. Black and brown students overwhelmingly, but the teaching and the teaching force is majority white, and maybe that can lead to some misunderstandings and a lack of cultural competency. I know that I harp on the disparities in discipline that exist amongst black students, especially those that are attending Milwaukee Public Schools. What can we do to encourage more black and brown folk to be in the classroom and to decide to be a teacher?
Well, I can talk specifically to what TFA does for recruitment, right? So, like I said, our percentages are around 40% bringing in teachers of color, right? Part of our strategy, a man named Andres on my team is recruiting locally at Marquette, UW Milwaukee. One thing he does is builds relationships with different student groups at the college level, right? So, a great partner to us has been the Roberto Hernandez Center over at UW Milwaukee, right? What Andres does is he doesn't just go there to recruit and say you should be a teacher. He's going there to find out what do the students value, what do they care about, how do they want to impact the community, and then helping those students in college see that a pathway towards realizing and living out their values is being a classroom teacher. And UW Milwaukee has a high percentage of kids who grew up in the city. So being able to tell kids, hey, you're in this position not just because of your merit, of which you highly deserved your space, but also because of the teachers that were in front of you that helped you realize your potential, right? How incredible is it for you to also do that for the future generations of students? That's what recruitment looks like. Knowing the individual, knowing their values, and helping them see that live out in the classroom.
Teach for America is a nonprofit organization that recruits and trains college graduates and professionals to teach for at least 2 years in under resourced urban and rural public schools across the United States. That brings up the critique. You have folks that probably have never been in a classroom since they were a student, and you're putting them in some cases in some very, very challenging environments. What do you say to those that use that as a critique? You're putting relatively inexperienced professionals in some very challenging classrooms.
Well, first of all, I think critique is feedback, right? Feedback, the things that we need to consider and ways that we can improve our program and share what our program is. So let me just talk a little bit about our program. We accept about 15% of folks who apply to Teach for America. A lot of the values and backgrounds we're seeking are folks who have led organizations or groups, has had outcomes with the places they've led. They've seen success in college. They've seen success in their professional background. They've led diverse groups. And if I just isolated that, like that's the type of leader that you would want in any scenario. Folks who have had a track record of success and worked in different groups and communities. Now, when they join Teach for America, they get coaching, right? Our coach at Teach for America, Sapphire is a former high school principal. That is who is supporting them every step of the way. They are teaching 5 weeks of summer school prior to getting into the first day of school and getting that feedback from mentor teachers at the school site, specifically at Milwaukee Academy of Science. They are getting mentor teacher support. And then they are getting professional development with us through 2 years and earning their certification and masters during their 2 year commitment. So I hear the feedback that talks about, like, okay, who are you putting in the classroom? And it's important for folks to know that it is not just like a linear experience. It is one with an incredible amount of support around individuals who are coming in with a lot of merit and talent that want to be great for children.
To make sure I heard you correctly, did you say that you all accept just 15% of the people that apply for TFA?
That's right.
That is incredibly selective.
That's right.
And do you believe that that selective process can help reduce turnover? Because I'd imagine if you were less selective, because turnover is always, it's a problem. Teachers are getting burnt out. It seems like now they're getting burnt out even faster than they were in previous generations. Is the selection process helping to cut down on potential burnout of teachers and reduce turnover?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a recent stat, right? So, as we mentioned, Teach for America is a 2 year commitment. And our recent cohort who just finished their commitment, 86% re- uh, uh, came back for a third year in the classroom, right? So, my folks who just completed their TFA commitment didn't leave. They are staying, working with children, right? How do I think they got there? I think they got there because A, they built great relationships with their children, saw the impact they were making in the classroom, and were scaffolded that support during their initial 2 years in the classroom, getting that coaching, getting that training. In terms of our recruitment, part of what we're looking for from people is how have you had instances in the past of persevering through challenges? Your challenges that you've experienced in college is going to be an indicator, not the only one. But when you get in the classroom and a student isn't following your direction or your lesson plan isn't going the way you wrote it yesterday, how do you find a different solution? How do you make a different connection? So when we're recruiting folks, when we are interviewing and accepting people, how have they demonstrated that perseverance in the past so that they can get through the challenges that are going to happen for every first year teacher?
Speaking with Michael Wynn, the executive director of Teach for America Milwaukee. Michael came to Milwaukee in 2009 as part of the very first TFA Milwaukee Corps and never left. Michael was taught at St. Anthony School and Dr. Benjamin Carson Academy, became principal of St. Anthony Middle School, and served as chief of staff and interim CEO at Carmen Schools of Science and Technology before taking over the region. 17 years in the city across private, public, charter, and district schools. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the 2030 literacy goal and TFA's citywide science of reading work. You're listening to The Truth with Sherwin Hughes on 101.7 FM. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back. Welcome back to the program. Michael Wynn is here. He's the executive director of Teach for America Milwaukee. We are going to dig into what I think is one of the most prevailing problems that exist in the city of Milwaukee. And every time these statewide report cards come out, I am quick to report on the progress and the performance of our school district because we heavily invest in it. And if the district needs more money and they ask us, taxpayers, hey, can we have a little bit more money because the babies can't read? We always open up our wallets and our property taxes go up. But for some reason, I don't believe that we are getting a sufficient return on our investment. There needs to be a heavier focus, maybe from different viewpoints of how we can double down on increasing literacy. There are about 31,000 kids in K-3 in Milwaukee schools right now, and only about 3,000 of them are meeting reading targets. Teach for America's work on the science of reading goes beyond their own core members, and they are doing great things across the city. Michael, what does it look like, and is 2030 realistic to make substantial improvements to these numbers?
So right now is supporting by we train our core members in science of reading and making sure they have the training they need to be great reading and teachers for their kiddos. We're also working with schools to manage the science of reading trainings that their schools or their teachers are receiving. Why does that matter? First of all, it would be a mistake for me not to mention the Milwaukee Reading Coalition. Milwaukee Reading Coalition started by Dr. Howard Fuller, by Ms. Joanne Anton, and the late Mr. Mark Sain, and has the backing of 400 education, nonprofit, community, and business leaders who have essentially said this is a problem that impacts all of Milwaukee, whether we talk about the well-being and health of children, communities and neighborhoods, or the economic engine of both the city and the state. If we don't figure out the reading issue that's prevalent for decades in this city, then we are continuing to watch generations of children receive a miseducation, as I've heard Dr. Howard Fuller say, right? Is 2030 realistic? Here's what 2030 serves as. 2030 serves as a marker for us that if we at Teach for America and across the country in different education systems are seeking to either double reading proficiency or seeing gains in children's outcomes in schools, then we have to pursue something. We have to try to put in efforts to better train teachers, get the right curriculum in front of kids, make sure we're reading at home, improving family involvement and schools outreach so that families are even more aware of how their kids are performing. 2030 allows us to have a marker, a benchmark, a litmus test that have we made gains? 4 years from now, how are kids performing? What has gone well? What has not? What needs to continue? What needs to change? Otherwise, quite honestly, we just stay on this hamster wheel of saying we're doing our best, having good intentions. But if we don't have a mile marker to measure and be accountable to these efforts that we're making from the state, as far as Act 20 and science of literacy, science of reading goes, down to the level of training teachers and spending money on curriculum, then all of this is going to be for naught if we can't see gains for children by a specific point of time.
To give people some perspective, 2030 is essentially so incoming freshmen, by the time they graduate, that is the deadline that has been set. Michael, did things go downhill when we stopped teaching phonics? Have we brought phonics and teaching phonics back to the curriculum? Because it used to be, I remember growing up, we had a whole phonics workbook. Mm-hmm. It was a very specific focus for many, many years of my education. Now, that also was in the 20th century. Did things change for the worse when we eliminated or reduced phonics in the classroom?
I think that's what the data tells us, right? So many of us in education have been guilty of this, right? And including me. I was a principal at a school where we didn't use science of reading fully. We used something called balanced literacy that relied more on context clues, relied more on kids, less on blending sounds and phonemic awareness. And when we say science of reading, like the semantics, like not to get too wonky, there's like a specific way you teach kids how to read, right? The easiest way to put this is like if those of us who remember the commercials for Hooked on Phonics, right? Like my parents bought me that, right? Like they made me do that when I was like 6, right? Like that's what science reading is getting back to the basics. And when we have diverted from that in the last 10 or 15 years, we have seen scores go down, proficiency levels drop, and of course COVID was there. But let's make no mistake, like the reading proficiency levels haven't been strong for decades. And the population that has been most affected are Black and brown children.
There's a conversation happening about parental choice program. I don't like the term voucher, but it's one that's very familiar with a lot of people. Charters and Milwaukee Public School budgets, the governor's race, etc. From your position, Michael, the person recruiting and training, who stands in front of the kids? What is the thing that the city keeps missing in this never-ending debate between public schools and charter schools and private schools? What are we not getting?
I'll try to bucket this in a few things. First is, for Teach for America, when we bring our core members and our alumni, so core members are the folks who are currently in the program, alumni who are folks who finished the program, our alumni are in the private schools, they're in the public charter, they're in the district. You put them in the same room together, they're talking about what we should be doing better for kids as a city. How can we improve reading scores? How can we change the way we teach? How do we build more connections with the teachers and the community? That's what the conversation is when we bring our community together, right? So I think it's important for folks to know that while they read the newspapers and read online that these debates are happening, and they are important debates, that educators want what's best for children. Now, the other thing that I think happens is, when we get in these debates around private schools, charter schools, or district schools, we're having a conversation as though we're all wearing different jerseys. Like this is like the NBA or something. We're all in the same league. The kids are all of the city, and there are many families in Milwaukee who couldn't tell you right now if their school was a public MPS school or a public charter school or a private school. And if they could, their interest is having an excellent education for their kids, right? The topic that I would love for us to have more than anything outside of this debate is accountability. What is an excellent school? In my opinion, an excellent school is where a child is learning how to read, learning how to do math, learning how to write, and being set up to get a college degree or post-secondary career that matches their values and helps them sustain, right? If you are a school that is not doing that for year over year, we need to have a conversation as to why you still have students in your building. We need to have a conversation about why you continue to be funded. We need to have accountability in a space where kids and families who are trusting the systems and adults in front of them, that they are getting what they deserve, which is an excellent education.
We're speaking with Mike Wynn, Executive Director of Teach for America, Milwaukee. We often hear, and we're going to hear a lot more of, we have to fully fund our public schools. Michael, the public schools need to be fully funded. Heard it incessantly during the Democratic primary. Very glad that primary is over. Looking forward to the general election. But our public schools are not fully funded. And you got the charter schools, and you got the voucher schools. We have to fully fund public schools. How much of the problem that we are seeing is the funding is not enough? We need to increase the per pupil allocation. Because if you talk to some folks, they'll tell you, well, it's all about the funding. If we have more money to invest in every single child, and of course, some of these disparities that we see will disappear. There's more to the story than that, right? So first and foremost, what does fully funding public education even look like? And is the problem that we are seeing, especially with the low number of children that can read proficiently, is it really a funding thing, or there's something else going
I
on?
think there's a complexity here. I think first of all, I think Dr. Cathelius over at Milwaukee Public Schools has stepped into a situation where she had to balance the budget, get the audits correct, understand how money has been spent, and so there are efforts happening at the district level to figure out what funding are we receiving, how are we spending that funding, and what impact does that have on children, right? So MPS is in the midst of trying to figure that out, and we watched how they had to restructure this past year for teacher and staffing. So they're in the midst of that right now. So that's a question that every school has to answer. The amount of money that I have, am I spending it in the best way for children to make sure they're getting the best education possible, right? The other thing is also true, right? As Teach for America bringing in teachers into schools, we often see our teachers and our alumni who are still in the classroom not just be the teacher. Sometimes they're the one checking in on the child's mental well-being. Sometimes they're the coach. Sometimes they have the bandage because that school doesn't have a nurse. Sometimes they're calling home because the school doesn't have the resources to have a parent coordinator, right? So I am watching, and my wife's an educator, and I see all the things that she has to do in addition to what's on a job description, right? So when we think about it that way, there are resources either needed to be provided to schools or ways that we are forming our budgets in schools that are providing the resources that not just children need, but that teachers need so that they can do what's best, which is teach children.
Michael, if people want more information about Teach for America, where should they go?
Teachforamerica.org. You can also reach out to me and my team at Teach for America Milwaukee specifically. I heard you right before I hopped on saying that you wanted to teach. I'll let you know right now that we take career changers all the time because you bring incredible experience and community involvement to the table. And I look forward to that conversation with you.
You guys are too selective. You only take 15%. I may not make the cut, but I do appreciate your confidence in me, and thank you so much for all that you do for the students here in Milwaukee. Michael Wynn, Executive Director of Teach for America Milwaukee. Appreciate you stopping by, buddy. You were great.
Thank you.
The Truth with Sherwin Hughes on 101.7 FM. We'll be right back.